Elias Grant woke with the sharp, uneasy feeling that something had gone wrong during the night. It wasn't the kind of fear that jolts a person awake after a nightmare, nor the heaviness that comes after bad news. This was different. This was the feeling of stepping into a room and realizing a picture frame had been moved. Not enough to notice at first, but enough to unsettle the mind. He sat up in the passenger seat of his old pickup truck, blinking against the sunlight. The sky above him stretched clear and flawlessly blue, the kind of summer sky that seemed almost exaggerated. Birds chirped somewhere beyond the trees. A warm breeze carried the smell of grass and dust from an empty highway. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. And that was the problem. He shouldn't have been here. Elias remembered driving late, pushing through the night on his return from a construction job 3 states over. He remembered pulling onto a rest stop near the New Mexico border because his eyes were too blurred to continue. He remembered the distant rumble he had assumed was a storm, though he'd seen no clouds. Then, nothing. He rubbed his eyes and stepped out of the truck. The parking area was silent. No cars, no people, not even the hum of passing trucks on the highway. Just stillness, heavy and complete. The worn visitor center building stood nearby with its faded tourist posters and sun-bleached benches. Its windows were intact. Its door hung open. "Hello," he called out. His voice echoed against the empty walls and came back hollow. Inside, the phones were dead. The power was off. Half-finished coffee cups sat on tables as if people had stepped away for only a moment. A jacket remained draped over a chair. A notebook lay open with a pen frozen mid-sentence. Elias felt the air thicken around him. Something had happened here. Something massive. Yet the world looked untouched. He stepped back outside and noticed something else. A faint haze on the horizon. Not smoke. Too thin. Not fog. Too warm. More like a shimmer, as though the air itself was trying to hide something beyond the distant ridges. He reached for his phone. No signal. No emergency alerts. Nothing. As he climbed the small hill behind the rest stop to get a better view, his boots crunched on dry dirt. The sun beat down with a warmth that felt too normal for the dread tightening in his chest. From the hilltop, the land spread out in all directions. Quiet, unmoving, open. But there, far across the desert, a column of dust twisted upward into that impossibly blue sky. Not from a truck or a storm, too vast, too deliberate. He stared at it, and something deep inside him stirred. Some faint, half-formed memory, like a whisper behind a locked door. He remembered a flash, a sound like the world cracking open, a wave of heat. Then, darkness. Elias stumbled back as if struck by a sudden gust of wind. Nuclear. The word burst into his mind with the sharpness of shattered glass. But how was he alive? Why wasn't the desert scorched? Where were the signs of devastation? And where were the people? He slid down the hill, heart pounding. He needed answers. There had to be survivors, a radio, some sign of life. The nearest town was Luna Crossing, a small community about 15 miles east. He'd been there before for fuel, a dusty cluster of diners, motels, and a hardware store. He jumped into the truck, turned the key, and breathed a sigh of relief when the engine rattled to life. Dust swirled behind him as he sped down the empty highway. As he approached Luna Crossing, he slowed to a crawl. Cars sat abandoned in the middle of the street, doors open. A grocery cart lay on its side near the entrance of the general store. A dog bowl sat full of water outside a silent house. But not a soul moved. Elias stepped out, calling into the stillness. "Anybody here?" His voice seemed to sink into the heat. Then he saw movement, just a flicker, inside the old diner. Relief washed through him. He pushed open the glass door. The bell above it chimed brightly, absurdly cheerful. A woman sat in a booth by the window, staring straight ahead. Her coffee was cold. Her eyes were open. "Ma'am?" Elias whispered. She didn't blink. He stepped closer. Then he froze. Her pupils were dilated, her expression locked, her body upright, unmoving, like a statue that had once been human, as though something had taken the world in an instant and left only shadows. Elias backed away, breath trembling. This wasn't abandonment. This wasn't evacuation. This was something else. Something worse. And he was completely alone. Or so he thought. From somewhere deeper in the diner, he heard a faint shuffle. A living sound, a survivor, or something that had survived. Elias froze in the middle of the diner, every muscle pulled tight. The shuffle he'd heard wasn't the restless noise of the frozen woman in the booth. He already sensed she would never move again. This sound had weight, hesitation, life. It came from behind the counter, near the kitchen doors. He grabbed a metal napkin dispenser as a makeshift weapon. It felt ridiculous, but reassuring enough that he tightened his grip and stepped forward slowly. "Hello?" His voice wavered. "If someone's there, I'm not here to hurt you." A faint breath answered him. A real breath. That alone almost brought tears to his eyes. He rounded the counter. A boy, no older than 12, was crouched on the floor beside a toppled stool, hands covering his ears as if the world was too loud. His clothes were dusty but clean, his dark hair unkempt, and his eyes? His eyes looked like someone who had seen far too much. When Elias took a step closer, the boy flinched violently. "It's okay," Elias said softly. "I'm alive. Like you." The boy stared at him for a long moment before slowly lowering his hands. "You heard it too?" he whispered. The boom." The memory struck Elias hard enough to make his vision swim. A sound that swallowed the world. A flash that had no color because it was too bright to be anything at all. Heat like breath from a dying sun. "Yes," Elias said, "I think I did." The boy nodded as if that confirmed something for him. Everyone froze. They just stopped. My mom was right there in that booth. She didn't even look scared, just paused. His voice cracked on the word mom. Elias knelt, feeling helpless. "What's your name?" "Caleb." "Well, Caleb, we need to get out of here. There might be others. Maybe over the ridge. Maybe in a shelter." Caleb looked at him with a strange mix of hope and doubt. "Are you sure? Because Luna Crossing feels broken." Elias glanced around. The entire diner was a snapshot of life interrupted. Plates half-eaten, lights off, bodies not dead, but not alive. He didn't know what to call it, and he didn't know how far the phenomenon spread. But he couldn't let the boy stay here. "We'll check," he said firmly. "But first, we need water and anything we can use. Then, we'll drive east." As they walked through the diner gathering supplies, Caleb suddenly stopped. "Do you hear that?" Elias listened. Silence. "No," he said, "exactly." Caleb swallowed. "Since the boom, I haven't heard a plane, or a truck, or birds. It's like everything got scared." Elias didn't admit it aloud, but he'd noticed too. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. Back outside, the truck stood alone on the empty street, heat shimmering above its hood. Elias lifted Caleb into the passenger seat, then slid behind the wheel. The highway stretched ahead, a thin ribbon leading into unknown silence. They drove past houses with open doors, swings frozen mid-sway, sprinklers still connected to hoses but long dry. No animals, no footsteps, no sound besides the engine. After several miles, the landscape began to change. The shimmer on the horizon grew stronger, like a curtain of distorted air. "What is that?" Caleb whispered. "I don't know." As they approached the distortion, Elias slowed to a stop. The air ahead seemed to ripple gently, not with heat, but with a faint flickering glow. It reminded him of light bending through water. Caleb tensed. "That wasn't there before." "You've seen it. Every morning, since the boom. It gets closer." Elias felt the prickling of dread crawl up his spine. The phenomenon wasn't static. It was advancing. "Maybe we should turn back," Caleb said, voice trembling. But turning back meant returning to silence, to frozen people, to a world that made no sense. Driving forward might mean danger, but at least it was the direction of answers. "We're going through," Elias said. Caleb tightened his grip on the door handle. Elias pressed the gas. The truck rolled forward. As the front bumper touched the shimmering air, a sudden wave of dizziness swept over them. The windshield wavered, light bending like a reflection on a disturbed pond. The engine groaned. Elias fought the instinct to slam on the brakes. "Don't stop," Caleb whispered. "Please." A pulse of cold flashed through the cab, cold in the middle of the dry heat. Elias shivered. Then, as quickly as it came, the distortion fell away. The world sharpened into focus. But it wasn't the world they had left behind. The sky was still blue, the warm air still clung to the desert, but the landscape ahead was scarred. Blackened soil, twisted metal, distant plumes of ash rising from collapsed structures. As if the shimmer had been a veil hiding the truth. Caleb stared, speechless. Elias gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. Because now he saw it clearly. The boom hadn't been a storm. It hadn't been an accident. America had been hit. And the shimmer hadn't been created by destruction. It had been created to hide it. At least for a while. Caleb whispered, "Why would anyone cover it up?" Elias didn't know, but he felt the heavy weight of the answer forming. Maybe the bombs hadn't killed everyone. Maybe something else had. Elias slowed the truck as they crossed into the devastated stretch of land. The highway head was cracked, buckled as if pushed upward by some immeasurable force. Cars lay scattered, overturned, or fused into the asphalt. The remains of buildings jutted from the horizon like broken teeth. The shimmer had hidden all of this, hidden a swath of destruction that stretched as far as Elias could see. Wind stirred faint trails of ash, scattering them like gray ghosts across the road. Caleb pressed his face against the window. This wasn't here. I mean, I didn't see it. You weren't supposed to, Elias murmured. But why? Elias had no answer yet, but the deeper dread came from something else. The realization that the devastation didn't look new. The burnt soil wasn't smoking. The metal wasn't glowing. Whatever had happened here hadn't been hours ago. It had been days. Maybe longer. We keep going, Elias said quietly. They ventured deeper into the ruined stretch. The silence there felt thicker, pressing against their skin, as though sound itself had been swallowed by the destruction. Occasionally, Elias thought he heard something, a faint hum beyond the edge of hearing, but every time he stopped the truck, the hum vanished. Caleb was the first to break the silence. Do you think the bombs did this? Elias hesitated. Nuclear weapons can do this, yes, he finally said. But the shimmer, what about it? I've never heard of anything like that. It felt controlled. Caleb hugged his arms tightly. So someone caused the boom, the freeze, and the shimmer. Maybe. Why would anyone do that? Elias didn't want to say the only answer that made sense, that whatever happened wasn't just an attack, but something more complex, and possibly far worse. They continued driving until the highway opened onto a vast crater. It spanned several miles across, a collapsed basin where an entire town must have once stood. Twisted frames of houses jutted from the edges like ribs. Elias stopped the truck. Caleb whispered, "This is where my dad worked. Cobalt Ridge." He said it was boring. Just a dusty town no one cared about. He swallowed hard. How do you erase a whole town? The crater didn't just look like destruction. It looked like erasure. Elias stepped out, feeling the heat radiate from the blackened soil. As he approached the edge, he noticed something strange. A faint vibration under his boots. Not movement. A hum. The same one he thought he'd imagined earlier. It pulsed, steady, like a heartbeat buried beneath the earth. He crouched, pressing a hand to the ground. The hum grew stronger. Caleb's voice carried from behind him. "What is it?" Elias shook his head. "Not natural, and not from a bomb. What else could do this?" He didn't answer. The vibration felt too rhythmic, too deliberate, like machinery far below the surface. But who could be operating anything underground after a nuclear strike? Unless... His thoughts were cut short when a voice echoed faintly from the far side of the crater. "Help!" Caleb grabbed Elias's sleeve. "Someone's alive!" The voice was distant, but unmistakable. Elias scanned the far ridge. A figure stood waving both arms above their head. "Come on!" Elias shouted as they ran back to the truck. He drove around the crater's perimeter, wheels crunching over fractured asphalt, until they neared the ridge. The figure stood atop a mound of debris, an older man in a sun-faded jacket, face smeared with dust. The moment Elias stepped out, the man stumbled toward him, desperation in every movement. "Thank God," the stranger rasped. "I thought I was the only one left." "We've been looking for survivors," Elias said. "What happened here?" The man's eyes darted across the crater, as though afraid to look at it for too long. "Not here. Please, help me get away from this place." Caleb tugged at Elias's sleeve. He looked scared. Elias nodded. "Sir, we can talk in the truck." Once inside, the man sagged against the seat, breathing hard. "My name's Dr. Warren Lyle," he said, voice trembling. "I worked at the research facility beneath Cobalt Ridge." Caleb stared. "There's a facility under the town?" "Yes," Dr. Lyle whispered. "It wasn't public knowledge. It wasn't even supposed to exist. We studied radiation shielding, temporal distortions, field effects." Elias felt the world narrow around him. "Temporal distortions?" Dr. Lyle ran a hand through his graying hair. "We developed a system meant to protect civilian areas from nuclear blasts. A last resort defense. A way to pause a region, freeze it, preserve lives." Caleb gasped. "Like the people in Luna Crossing?" Dr. Lyle nodded weakly. "We activated the shield just seconds before the strike hit. It locked the town and the surrounding region into a stasis bubble, but..." He swallowed hard. But something went wrong. The field expanded. It didn't stop where it should have. It grew and grew, swallowing everything in its path. Elias felt cold despite the desert heat. "You froze thousands of people." "We tried to shut it down," Dr. Lyle whispered, "but the blast collapsed the facility. Many died. The bubble moved on its own after that, like it had a mind." "And the shimmer?" Elias asked. "The boundary of the field. What you drove through. When it passed this area, it hid the destruction until stability returned." Caleb stared out the windshield, horror dawning on his face. "So my mom, everyone, they're stuck because of you." Dr. Lyle didn't answer. His silence spoke louder than words. Elias clenched the steering wheel. "Can you reverse it? Unfreeze them?" Dr. Lyle closed his eyes. "Maybe. But the core is unstable. If we don't shut it down soon." He took a trembling breath. "It won't just freeze people. It will freeze everything." Elias felt the weight of the words settle over him. Caleb whispered, "What do we do?" Dr. Lyle opened his eyes slowly. "We go back into the crater." The truck crept toward the crater as if drawn by gravity alone. Elias felt the weight of every mile in his fingers, wrapped tightly around the steering wheel. Caleb sat beside him in rigid silence, his small frame stiff with the kind of fear no child should have to endure. In the back seat, Dr. Lyle leaned forward, clutching the headrest. "There," he said, pointing toward the center of the crater, "under the debris. That's where the access shaft should be." Elias followed the direction of his trembling hand. Amid the twisted metal and shattered concrete, a partially collapsed mound jutted upward, like a broken spine. Heat shimmered above it. The faint hum beneath the ground pulsed steady and rhythmic. Caleb's voice was small but steady. "That hum, it's louder now." Dr. Lyle closed his eyes as though the sound brought him pain. "The reactor core is destabilizing. The shield field must be cycling faster to compensate. If the system overloads..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Elias brought the truck to a stop at the crater's edge. The ground swayed gently under their feet as they climbed out, the vibration more noticeable now. The air here felt heavier, thick with a metallic tang that clung to the back of the throat. "Help me move those panels," Dr. Lyle said, hurriedly pointing to a cluster of bent metal sheets, half buried in dust. Elias went to work, prying up twisted metal and heaving it aside. Caleb helped where he could, though Elias tried to shield him from the sharpest edges. Each removed piece sent little puffs of ash into the air. At last, a rectangular hatch appeared beneath the rubble. Its paint was blistered, and a jagged crack ran across the center. But it was intact. Dr. Lyle dropped to his knees, brushing debris from the surface. "There's no power," he muttered. "Manual override. Elias, help me." Together they gripped the rusted wheel and strained. Metal screamed in protest, but slowly, agonizingly, the hatch began to turn. One final wrench, and it swung open with a hollow clang that echoed across the crater. A breath of frigid air rushed upward from the darkness below, shocking in the desert heat. Caleb shivered. "Why is it so cold?" "The field core draws in energy," Dr. Lyle explained. "It consumes heat, sound, light, time. Everything around it slows." Elias peered into the shaft. A metal ladder disappeared into shadows. Dim emergency lights flickered far below, weak but alive. "Are you sure this is safe for him?" Elias asked, nodding toward Caleb. "No," Dr. Lyle said honestly. "But leaving him up here is worse." Caleb squared his small shoulders. "I can go. I'm not scared." Elias knew he was lying, but bravery wasn't the absence of fear. Just the will to move anyway. "All right," he said softly. "Stay close behind me." They descended. The air grew colder with each rung. A deep mechanical thrum reverberated through the steel walls, steady like the pulse of something alive. At the bottom of the ladder, the corridor stretched ahead, walls scorched, ceiling fractured. Emergency lights blinked unevenly, casting sickly, pulsing shadows. Dr. Lyle led them through a maze of broken hallways, past shattered monitors, and overturned lab tables. Papers were strewn everywhere. Some bore diagrams Elias couldn't make sense of. Rings of shifting symbols, wave patterns looping around human silhouettes, sketches of fields folding in on themselves. Caleb paused at one. "Did you draw this?" he asked Dr. Lyle. "No," the scientist whispered. "This is from the temporal modeling team. We were trying to understand how far the stasis field could extend. We never meant to activate it at full power. We thought we had safeguards." Elias heard the guilt in his voice. Heavy. Crushing. "You meant well," Elias said, "but you still have a chance to fix it." They reached a reinforced door, half torn from its hinges. Beyond it lay a large chamber with curved walls. In the center, suspended above the floor by shredded cables, hung a spherical machine the size of a van, cracked, glowing faintly from within. Blue-white arcs of energy crawled across its surface, illuminating the chamber in erratic flashes. Caleb whispered, "That's it?" Dr. Lyle nodded. "The core. The only one of its kind." The hum here was almost deafening. Elias felt it through his teeth, through his bones, through the back of his skull. "It's unstable," Dr. Lyle said. "Every pulse is stronger than the last. If this continues, the field will sweep across the entire continent." "And freeze everything?" Elias asked. "No," Dr. Lyle whispered. "It will erase everything. Lock the world into a still frame forever." Caleb clung to Elias's sleeve. "How do we stop it?" Dr. Lyle approached a ruined control panel, hands trembling. "I need to reach the failsafe, but the energy surges. They interfere with electronics. Someone needs to get close enough to manually reset the stabilizer ring." Elias stared at the sphere. The air around it twisted in subtle waves, bending light like a mirage. A faint ringing filled his ears, as if time stretched thin. "You're saying someone has to walk into that?" Elias asked hoarsely. "It's not lethal yet," Dr. Lyle said, "but you'll feel effects, disorientation, memory distortion. Maybe worse." Caleb shook his head vehemently. "No! Elias, don't!" Elias knelt, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "I'll be okay. I won't let this thing take the world, or your mom, or the others." Caleb's eyes shimmered with fear. "Promise?" "I promise." Elias stood. Dr. Lyle pointed to a panel on the sphere's side, a small hatch flickering in and out of visibility. "There. Pull the lever inside. Hold it until the lights stop flashing." "Got it." Elias took a deep breath and stepped forward. The moment he entered the field's aura, the world shifted. Sound warped. His vision doubled. The floor seemed to tilt beneath him. Memories flickered at the edge of consciousness. Brief flashes of people he'd loved, roads he'd driven, days he'd lived but couldn't quite reach. He forced one foot forward, then another. The humming grew louder. His skin tingled. His heartbeat stuttered in strange rhythms. Halfway there, the sphere pulsed violently. A wave of temporal distortion slammed into him. Suddenly, he wasn't in the chamber. He stood in Luna Crossing. People filled the streets. Caleb's mother passed him, smiling under the summer sun. Cars rolled by. Birds chirped. Life moved. It was the moment before the boom. But something was wrong. No one noticed him. No one saw the sky darken. No one heard the rumble building above. Elias screamed, but the world didn't hear. The flash came. A white, silent annihilation. And then he was back in the chamber, collapsed on one knee, gasping. "Elias!" Caleb cried. "Keep going!" Elias forced out, pushing himself up. His hand reached the hatch. The lever glowed faintly, flickering between solid and immaterial. He grabbed it and felt it resisting, as if time itself fought his touch. Elias clenched his jaw and pulled. The sphere screamed, sparks flying. Light collapsed inward in violent surges. "Hold it," Dr. Lyle shouted. Elias felt his body stretch thin, his mind flickering between moments. The lever shook violently. The world blurred. His memories cascaded, too fast, too bright, too loud. But through the haze he heard one sound clearly. "Elias, don't let go." Caleb's voice. He tightened his grip, teeth gritted, refusing to yield. The sphere gave one final pulse. Then everything went white. White. Just a boundless, weightless whiteness that pressed gently against Elias's mind. He didn't feel his body. He didn't feel the floor. He didn't feel the hum of the core, or the cold air, or the ache in his hands. Only drifting. Voices shimmered in the distance. Faint, watery echoes, bending in strange directions. "Elias, hold on. Stabilization failing. Don't leave." A child's voice broke through most clearly. "Elias, come back. Please." That voice anchored him, pulled at him like gravity. The whiteness cracked. Elias opened his eyes. At first, everything was a blur of shape and color, like the world hadn't fully remembered how to assemble itself. Slowly, the chamber came into focus. Cracked floors, shattered consoles, dim lights flickering overhead, and Caleb kneeling beside him, gripping his arm tightly. "You're alive!" the boy cried, eyes wet with relief. "You didn't disappear. You didn't freeze. You're really here." Elias tried to speak but managed only a rasp. He looked toward the center of the room. The sphere, the core, was dark. No glow, no arcs of energy, no vibration. Silent. Still. Dr. Lyle was on his knees beside it, hands trembling as he checked the inactive control panel. "It's done," he whispered. "The field collapsed. The freeze is gone." "Gone?" Caleb whispered. "Does that mean my mom?" Elias pushed himself up, legs shaking but functional. "We need to get to the surface," he said. They climbed back up the ladder, harder than the descent, but driven by hope. As they emerged into the sunlight, Elias blinked rapidly. For a moment he thought the world was shimmering again. But it wasn't a distortion. It was motion. Real motion. A warm breeze stirred dust across the crater floor. A piece of debris tumbled, rolling a few feet before settling. Insects buzzed faintly from somewhere in the brush at the crater's edge. Life. Small but undeniably alive. Caleb gasped. "The wind. Elias, the wind is back." Elias felt something loosen deep in his chest, a pressure he'd been carrying since Luna Crossing. He hadn't noticed the wind was gone until now. Dr. Lyle squinted up at the sky. "The freeze bubble is gone. Everything it held should be normal again." "Normal," Elias repeated quietly. "Or as close as we can hope for." They hurried back to the truck. The engine roared to life, smoother than before, as if freed from invisible resistance. Elias floored it, racing toward Luna Crossing. As they neared the outskirts, something moved in the road. A figure. A woman. She stumbled forward, shielding her eyes from the sun, as if seeing daylight for the first time. A second figure emerged from a porch. Then another. And another. People blinked dazedly, turning their heads in confusion. Elias slowed the truck to a crawl. Caleb's breath hitched. "Mom." She stood in the middle of the street, her hand pressed to her forehead. Her expression was dazed, frightened, searching. Then her eyes landed on the truck. On Caleb. She gasped. Caleb flung the door open before Elias could stop him. The boy sprinted down the street, feet kicking up dust, arms outstretched. "Mom!" She dropped to her knees and caught him. Holding him so tightly, Elias thought she might never let go. She sobbed into his hair, stroking his face, murmuring words Elias couldn't hear. Elias looked away, giving them the moment they deserved. People poured out of houses like survivors, emerging from a dream. Some crying, some confused, some embracing each other with desperate relief. Dogs barked from yards. Sprinklers sputtered back to life. A car alarm wailed briefly before someone shut it off. Life resumed in an instant, like a clock restarting. Dr. Lyle stood beside Elias, shoulders slumping with a mix of relief and guilt. "They're all back," he whispered. "But the destruction outside the bubble, that remains. The bombs were real." Elias nodded solemnly. "America's not the same." "No," Dr. Lyle said, "but it's alive." Caleb and his mother walked back toward them. She wiped her eyes, still holding Caleb's hand tightly. "You saved him," she said shakily. "Whoever you are, thank you." Elias shook his head. "He saved me." Caleb looked up at him. "What happens now?" Elias glanced around at the town, people emerging, roads alive again, the sun warm above them.